What if I told you that by looking at one Amish woman for 30 seconds, you could read her faith, her marital status, her community, and every rule she lives by? No conversation required, no questions asked, just her clothing, her hair, and her face. These are the 10 rules written directly onto her body. Rule 1. The Kapp. The first thing you notice, even before she gets close, is what she is wearing on her head. It's called the Kapp, a prayer covering, a small structured cap, usually white, pinned directly onto her hair. Not something she puts on for church or special occasions. She wears it all day long, and even at night. Many Amish women sleep in some form of covering because the doctrine is clear: a woman must always be ready to pray, and to pray, her head must be covered. This reaches directly back to the Bible. 1 Corinthians 11 verse 6 says that if a woman does not cover her head, she might as well have her hair cut off. For Amish women, that instruction is not metaphor. It is a policy. In Lancaster County, the Kapp is heart-shaped. In Holmes County, Ohio, it is a straight-sided box style. She begins wearing it at baptism, somewhere between 16 and 22. From that moment forward, the covering is not optional. It is who she is. Rule 2. The hair under the Kapp, hidden from anyone who will ever see her in public, is her hair. And the rule is simple. It has never been cut, not trimmed, not shaped, not touched by scissors at any point in her life. The belief comes from 1 Corinthians 11 verse 15, which states that a woman's long hair is her glory. For the Amish, that is not a suggestion. It is instruction. But that glory must be hidden. Because hair is considered a thing of beauty, it cannot be displayed. So every morning she pins it into a bun, covers it with the Kapp, and goes about her day. No one outside her household will ever see it down. Dyeing is forbidden. Styling tools are forbidden. Altering its natural state in any way is forbidden. She cares for it in private, oiling the scalp, braiding at night, and covers it the moment she steps into the world. Rule 3. The dress. She is wearing a dress, long, falling at least 2 inches below her ankles, with long sleeves and a high neckline. No pattern on the fabric, no print, no stripes, solid color only: navy, black, brown, burgundy, or forest green, depending on her community. Over it, she wears an apron, and that color communicates too. A married woman wears black to church. A single woman wears white. A gray apron means everyday farm work. Each detail is a word in a language written in cloth. The dress was almost certainly made by hand, on a foot-powered treadle machine, because electric sewing machines are forbidden. Every stitch placed by a person, not a machine. The tradition passes from mothers to daughters to granddaughters. What fabrics are acceptable, what lengths are permitted, what colors are approved by the ordinum, the community's unwritten code of conduct passed down orally and reaffirmed twice a year. The clothing says everything before she speaks. Rule 4. No jewelry, no rings, no bracelets, no watch, no earrings, nothing, and not even on her wedding day. The ordinum forbids personal jewelry entirely, rooted in 1 Peter 3 verses 3 to 4, which instructs women not to adorn themselves with gold or pearls, but rather with faith and modesty. For the Amish, a bare finger is not a sign of being unmarried. It is a sign of a different kind of commitment, one that requires no symbol because it is lived visibly in every other aspect of her appearance. Her marital status is announced by the color of her Kapp, not a ring. That bare hand is itself a statement. Every accessory she is not wearing is a rejection of vanity, display, and the desire to be noticed. The Amish call it gelassenheit, a word meaning yielding and letting go of the self. You can see it from the moment you meet her. Rule 5. No makeup. What you are seeing is her face, exactly as it is. No foundation, no concealer, no mascara, no lipstick, nothing. Not because she can't afford it, but because it is forbidden. Makeup is one of the clearest expressions of vanity in Amish life. The desire to alter your appearance, to attract attention, to present a version of yourself different from what God made. And vanity is not a minor infraction. It is considered one of the central threats to community and faith. The standard applied to her face is the same applied to her clothing and her home. Nothing that calls attention to the individual, nothing that sets her apart, nothing that says, "Look at me." She wakes up, washes her face, pins on her Kapp, and that is the face the world sees every day for her entire life. Rule 6. The color of the covering. You already know she wears a cap, but the color of that covering is a rule all its own, and it communicates a specific piece of information to everyone in her community. White means she is married. Black means she is single, specifically a younger single woman, in her teens or 20s, and it is worn for church services. White is worn by women of all ages at most times. It is the covering of the married woman, the mature woman, the woman who has made her vow. When a young woman's cap shifts from black to white, it is not just a change of fabric. It is a public declaration, visible to everyone in the room, that her life has entered a new chapter. No announcement needed. No diamond to flash. The color does the speaking. The shape of the cap tells you her community. The color tells you her status. And the fact that she is wearing it at all tells you she is baptized, committed, and living inside the covenant. It is a system so efficient that anyone raised within it can read another person's entire life situation at a glance. Rule 7. No buttons on her clothing. This one requires an explanation, because to the outside eye it seems like the strangest rule of all. No buttons, not on her dress, not on her cape, not on her apron. Instead, her clothing is held together with straight pins pressed against her body, or with hooks and eyes, or snaps, and every morning she fastens herself into her clothing piece by piece, pin by pin. The answer to why goes back to 17th and 18th century Europe, where buttons were not ordinary objects. They were status symbols. Military officers wore ornate, elaborate buttons on their uniforms to indicate rank, and the European aristocracy took this further, wearing buttons made of precious metals inlaid with jewels as jewelry in themselves. Buttons announced who you were in the social hierarchy. The Amish rejected that entire system. As pacifists who do not serve in any military, they reject anything associated with military hierarchy or the glorification of rank, and buttons, with their direct association with military uniforms, became one of the visible markers of a world they chose not to belong to. There is also a practical dimension. By not using buttons, every woman in the community looks essentially the same regardless of her wealth or standing, because pins cannot be made nicer or plainer the way buttons can. Every morning, she presses the pins into place. It takes longer. It is less convenient. That, in part, is the point. The inconvenience is the commitment made visible. Rule 8. Submission to her husband. This rule is not visible in the same way the others are, but it shapes everything. When an Amish woman is in public, her husband leads and she follows. When a decision must be made about the family, the household, the community, he has the final word. This is not a cultural preference or a soft tradition. It is a doctrine rooted in Scripture, enforced by the ordinum, and accepted as the divine order of things by the community as a whole. Ephesians 5 verse 22 states that wives should submit to their husbands as unto the Lord, and for the Amish, that is not a historical passage to be interpreted. It is instruction. And so in public, the husband sits at the head of the table. He speaks first, and she defers. But the reality inside the home is more nuanced than it might appear from outside. The running of the household is her domain entirely. The cooking, the children, the sewing, the garden, the canning, the daily management of everything that keeps a family alive. Many major decisions are made jointly, and some Amish women have even built their own successful businesses, quilt shops, food stands, craft enterprises, with their husbands working alongside them. The structure is clear, but within it, Amish women hold a significant and recognized power. Still, the structure is real. In public, she walks slightly behind. She does not contradict, she defers. And that visible posture is itself a rule that anyone who knows what to look for can read. Rule 9. No education beyond 8th grade. When she was roughly 13 or 14 years old, her formal education ended. Not because she wasn't bright, not because the school ran out of resources, but because the ordnung requires it. And because of a landmark 1972 U.S. Supreme Court case, Wisconsin versus Yoder, the Amish were legally granted the right to stop their children's schooling after 8th grade on the grounds of religious freedom. The Amish believe that education beyond 8th grade leads children away from the community because higher learning introduces worldly values, individualism, ambition, the pursuit of prestige that conflict with the Amish way of life. The knowledge needed to farm, to sow, to raise children, to run a household doesn't come from high school or college. It comes from living alongside the people who already know how to do it. And so the moment school ends, the real education begins. For a girl, this means entering the domestic world fully, working alongside her mother, learning to sew the family's clothing, learning to cook from scratch, preserve food, tend a large garden, and manage a household with 8 or 10 children. She may briefly work as a teacher in the community's one-room schoolhouse, but only until she is married. Once she marries, she comes home, and that is where she stays. Only 3% of Amish women hold jobs outside the household. The education she received was not designed to prepare her for the outside world. It was designed to prepare her for this one. Rule 10. Clothing her family wears this final rule is not a prohibition. It is a responsibility. Every piece of clothing worn by every member of her family, her husband, her children, herself, she makes by hand or on a treadle sewing machine, from fabric she selected, cut, pinned, and stitched. The husband's coat, the children's dresses, her own cape, the aprons, the coverings, every one of them, her work. Some Amish women sew up to 4 dresses at a time for themselves, because the old Amish saying goes that a woman needs 1 dress to wash, 1 to wear, 1 for formal occasions, and 1 to spare, and that is her entire wardrobe for dresses, all made by her own hands. This rule is, in many ways, the one that holds all the others together, because the cap she wears has to be made, the dress without buttons has to be made, the apron that announces her marital status has to be made, and the clothing that covers her uncut hair, that pins together without zippers or Velcro, that never bears a pattern or a logo or a ribbon, all of it has to be made by someone. That someone is her. Mothers teach daughters. Daughters teach granddaughters. The patterns and measurements and methods passed down by hand and practiced until they are instinct. It is not considered a burden. It is considered one of the core expressions of who she is, a keeper of the home, a provider for her family, a woman whose work sustains everything around her. She does not shop for clothes. She creates them. And in creating them, she creates, every single day, the visible language of her community. Here is what makes Amish life unlike almost any other way of living in the modern world. Nothing is hidden. Every rule that governs an Amish woman, every restriction, every requirement, every expectation can be read from the outside. The shape of her cap tells you her community. The color tells you her status. The pins on her dress tell you her values. The bare fingers tell you her faith. The face without makeup tells you her relationship with pride. And the hem length, the sleeve length, the fabric, the absence of patterns. Every detail is a sentence in a language that her entire community speaks fluently. And those rules were not invented to oppress. They were invented to unify. In a world that prizes individuality above almost everything, the Amish made the opposite choice. Every woman looks essentially the same. Every household follows the same code, and the Ordnung does not ask anyone to be exceptional. It asks everyone to be faithful. Whether you agree with that bargain or not, whether you see those rules as restrictions or as structure, as limitations, or as belonging, one thing is undeniable. You can see every single one of them from the road.